Well, hey, welcome back. In this episode, we're going to discuss how a sports broadcaster can improve during the winter. And this was always a big topic for me because I started out as a minor league baseball broadcaster. And in professional baseball, you really go hard for those 3 or 6 or 8 months of the season. And then when it's over, oftentimes you have a lot of downtime in the winter. But my goal was always to get better and improve. And so this episode, we're going to talk about how you can improve in the winter, even if your season isn't until the spring, the summer. But obviously these tips you can use throughout the year to improve, whether you're not in season, whether you're a basketball broadcaster and it is the summer, or whether you're a baseball broadcaster and it's the winter, or if you just want to improve anytime. So let's take a look at these 3 ways that a sports broadcaster can improve during the winter. And then after these 3, I'm going to have our book of the day. It's a very important book that every aspiring sports broadcaster is going to want to read. And it's possible you've already read it. So let's take a look. The number 1 way, and these are 3. The third one is probably going to blow your mind a little bit. You've probably never considered this third tip. But the first way that a sports broadcaster can improve during the winter, exactly what you're watching me do right now. Start hosting a YouTube channel. And you might say, Rick, that's crazy. I don't want to host a YouTube channel. By the way, my name is Rick Schultz. Thank you for joining us here on the Sportscasters Club online program. Whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on the podcast, please make sure to subscribe so you get all of our videos if you find them helpful. But yes, the first way that you can improve, which is just so huge, is by hosting a YouTube show or a podcast. And these options were just not available when I was in college in the mid-90s, going to Fordham University, because we didn't have the technology, obviously. We didn't have cell phones, we didn't have smartphones and the ability. As a matter of fact, the internet was just burgeoning at the time. I can remember going to the Fordham Library and I had to do a special project with research on the internet. And I was really salty about it because I wanted to go research in the encyclopedias and in the different books in the library. I didn't want to go over to the computer. But I did it, and 30 years later, I think we're all better for it, the fact that we have the internet. But if you want to improve, start a YouTube channel. Put out content that's related to your career. If you're a baseball broadcaster, put out winter baseball content, hot stove material, previews for the upcoming season, whatever it might be. If you want to do it on podcasts, so it's audio only, I use Buzzsprout, and I've used Buzzsprout as a host for my podcast for many years. It's fun, it's easy, and if you're listening to the podcast now, check the description because I have a special offer where you can save if you decide to try out Buzzsprout and see how it works for you. But that's something you can do in the off season. Number 1, it's going to keep you sharp. You're going to be talking to a camera or a microphone. You're going to be discussing ideas. You're going to be keeping your skills sharp. That's number 1. But number 2, obviously when you look to move up and you look to advance your career, any prospective employer can go right to this, and this is your online CV. This is your resume. This is your demo tape, as we used to call it 30 years ago, because what we used to do is we used to have a cassette tape that we'd record something, and then we'd make some dub copies, and then we'd mail the physical cassette tape to a ball club or to a radio station, and they would get tons of them. I can remember going to different radio executives' offices, and they would open the drawer and they'd have dozens and dozens of tapes because that's how people would audition. That's how you would send your resume to try to get a job. But now you've got YouTube. You've got podcasting. You can put yourself out there and market your skills immediately across the world, virtually for free. I mean, this podcast, I don't spend much at all. Just some basic equipment, and you can do the same. If you want to know how, drop a comment if you have any specific questions, and I'll be sure to answer you and send you in the right direction. But you can have a YouTube show today. You can start your YouTube show today. as well as a podcast. So that's the number one way that sports broadcasters can improve in the winter. Number two, and this ties into our special book of the day that I have coming up in just a few minutes. But in the off season, you should be reading everything you can. That's the second way to improve. You should be devouring material, everything you can. And I'll use, for example, a friend of mine, Steve Lennox, who's a prominent broadcaster with ESPN and many different places, play-by-play guy as well, just been in the business for 30 years. And every time I see a post of his online, it's on Facebook, I think most of the time I see his posts, he's sharing a new book that he's going to be reading. I think he had one last week about Carl Yastrzemski. And I guarantee you, the reading that he's built up over the years helps him when he hosts a program. It helps him when he does play-by-play of a game, because you never know when some knowledge that you gain from a book is going to be something you can add and add some value to your audience during a broadcast. And you may not think a book about Carl Yastrzemski in the middle of January is going to have any impact. But then in June, when you come across a situation and something happens during the game, it might trigger something in your brain and you say, you know, something similar happened with Carl Yastrzemski. Let me tell you about it. And that's how you become an added value to your listener or your viewer. So number two is read everything you can. Devour it. It used to be the newspaper back in my day, and the box scores and magazines. I would get Baseball Digest delivered to the house, and I'd get the USA Today special weekly or monthly publications, or Baseball America. Gosh, Baseball America was the Bible when I was broadcasting professional baseball in the 90s. It was the Bible. And every month when you got that magazine, you learned about the prospects, and you learned about the storylines and anything going on with players in the off season that you didn't know, because we didn't have the internet like we do now. But now you can read everything online as well. So read. That's the number two way that you can always improve. And number three, the third way that I picked that you can improve, and this really wasn't one that I invented. This was something that Marty Glickman used to tell us to do when we would sit with him every Tuesday at Fordham University. And he would ask, Rick, do you want to be better at play-by-play? And I'd say, sure, Marty, of course I do. And he'd say, here's what I want you to do. I want you to go back to your dorm room this week, and I want you to do play-by-play of your dorm room every day for a week, and then come back and I want to talk about it next week. I'm like, Marty, what are you talking about? I want to do play-by-play of baseball. I want to do play-by-play of football games. Why do I want to do play-by-play of my stinky, cluttered, cramped dorm room? And he said, trust me, do it and come back. So we would do the play-by-play. It wasn't just me. It was Spiro Ditas and Connell McShane and who else? Tony Reale and Mike Maffei, and all kinds of great broadcasters were in that group. Charles Costello and Mark Savage. Too many to name. So we'd come back, and then Marty would say, tell me about that experience. And I'd say, well, you know, it felt pretty silly. I felt ridiculous doing play-by-play of my dorm room because my roommate was looking at me like, what are you doing? And Marty said, what did you notice? And we would notice that as the week went on, it became easier to do play-by-play. The words went from our mouth, from our brain to our mouth and out a lot more smoothly. So at the beginning, we would say, I see a green lamp with a tan cover and a picture with a black frame on the wall. But by the end, we could describe the green lamp with the tan shade and the photograph of the baseball interview with a black frame around it and the white ceiling and the brown wall circling the office, and we would become more smooth. And that is one way that we practiced doing play-by-play. Because then when we were calling a basketball game, right corner Spatola, up top to Jonte Harrell, swings it left to Anderson. Anderson drives baseline, kicks it back out to the left wing. 3-point shot, Spatola, he hits. when you do play-by-play, your brain is already in that mode because you've been practicing all winter. And so that was one of Marty's great things that he imparted to us. Part of his genius was to practice doing play-by-play of wherever you are, of your home, of your car, as you're driving, which we'll talk about another time, doing play-by-play of everything you see around you at home, wherever you are. It's practice. And as the great Allen Iverson used to say, practice, practice, practice. That's not quite what he said, but you can Google that one too if you want to see what he said. But that's how you become better. And that's how you become a better play-by-play broadcaster in season. It's when you practice it throughout the winter and throughout your off season. So I hope that's helpful. But before I go, I want to share this book of the day. And it's ironic, we were just talking about the great Marty Glickman. This book that every sports broadcaster should read, and in my opinion, every sports fan as well. The Fastest Kid on the Block by Marty Glickman. Marty wrote this book before he passed away when he was working with us at Fordham. What year was it? About 1996 he wrote this book. And it's a fantastic history lesson. It talks about Marty being on the Olympic team, the track and field Olympic team for the USA, representing America in the 1936 Olympics in Germany. And I'm not going to give away too much about that other than to say Marty did not get to run because he was Jewish. So you take a look at that, read that, and you'll get a great appreciation for Marty the athlete and Marty the historical figure. And then the second half of the book is all about how to be a better broadcaster, how to build your skills, how to build your career, how Marty did it, and how you can do it also. So this is a fantastic book, The Fastest Kid on the Block. I will leave a link here on YouTube. I'll leave a link here in the podcast as well. So if you want to pick up this book, you can. You can find it on Amazon. And I'll even show you, this one is signed. To Rick, you're on your way, Marty Glickman. And this was probably right when it came out. I remember I got a copy, brought it in, Marty signed it because he would meet with us every Tuesday at Fordham, which is the reason I went to Fordham University. So hopefully you enjoy that book. And again, the 3 ways a sports broadcaster can improve during the winter: starting a YouTube channel or podcast, reading everything you can, and number 3, doing play-by-play of your home. Sounds strange, but those 3 things will help you. Hope you enjoyed it. And until next time, I'm Rick Schultz. Please subscribe so you'll get all of our content, and we'll see you next time.